Hello and welcome. In this video I will explain how lubrication system work on this engine. Now this engine is also very similar to the Maxi engine, if not maybe completely identical when it comes to lubrication. So the first thing about this engine, it has a oil tank. So the oil is coming from the tank into the oil pump, it is distributed to the engine, and after that it is returned back to the oil tank. So this is connection when the oil hose are connected. So this here is the intake and this here is the outtake. So from this part here there is a channel, two channel that goes straight to the oil pump. So this is the outtake. So outtake is here. And this is the intake. So this hole here is the intake. The oil is coming from this part here. It is entering into the oil pump. The oil pump is pumping oil to the engine, and after that the oil pump is also pumping back that oil back to the oil pump. So this is the oil pump. So this would be the intake. Now this pump is a double pump. So this is one pump and this here is the second oil pump. So this pump here is for the intake and this pump distributes oil to the engine. This second pump is sucking oil from the engine and returning it back to the oil tank. So after you start the engine, the oil pump starts to pump oil into the part that need to be lubricated. So the first part is the crankshaft. In most old engine, the crankshaft is lubricated by itself. It doesn't have oil pump, but this engine has oil pump that lubricates crankshaft. So this hole here is connected with this part. So there is also one hole here. Now this part is some sort of the, you can call it a gasket or shaft seal. Because the crankshaft will enter into this part and it is going to be like this. So you have a small hole, the enter is entering into this part here. There is a channel all around the crankshaft. So the oil that enters here is under pressure and it will enter into the crankshaft. There is a two hole, one is here and the second one is here. Through that hole the oil is entering into the crankshaft, into this compartment here and also here. Some crankshaft does not have this type of lubrication, but this one has. And if you have crankshaft like this, it is very important to remove these parts. So this is threaded part. Now this part here, you can call it, it is some sort of the bucket. So the grease and the mud that will enter into the crankshaft, it will be in this compartment here. Eventually this will fill and it will stuck this small channel that goes inside here, and after that the main bearing on the crankshaft will not have good lubrication. The crankshaft will still be lubricated by the oil that will be spilled all around inside the engine, but it will not have good lubrication. So through this hole here the oil will enter under the pressure. It will enter into this chamber here. There is a second hole or tunnel that is drilled under this angle, something like this, and that channel is connected with the bearing, and through that channel this crankshaft bearing will be lubricated. So this is how this type of the crankshaft is lubricated. I also have another crankshaft, and this is the another model of this crankshaft. This is another type of the crankshaft. As you can see, it does not have this chamber. And also there is a difference. This here is only one channel and here there are three channels. Now the reason for that is because this is a oil channel and this channel are for the some sort of the gasket. It is something like a piston ring. There are two rings and those two rings are some sort of the gasket, so that the oil will enter into this hole here. And also there is only one hole. There are no two holes like on this crankshaft. So the oil will enter here, it will go through the axle and enter into the main bearing area, so it will lubricate bearing. If you have this type of the crankshaft, it is very important to clean this part, because if you don't clean it, this one is not cleaned, so everything is filled with some sort of the oil mud up to here. So this one is cleaned. So there are around 3 centimeters of oil and mud inside of this part. If this chamber is filled, then it will probably block lubrication and the crankshaft will be defective at one point. So now when we have covered the crankshaft lubrication, we can continue with the camshaft lubrication, camshaft drive and engine head. So this hole here is exactly for that. So there is a channel that leads through this part here. So this is part of the bearing for camshaft mechanism, and also that channel will go here. So at one point the oil will enter into the cylinder through this hole here. Once when the oil enters into this part here, it will fill this channel here, and through this hole will enter inside of this bearing. Inside is a needle bearing, and it will lubricate this needle bearing. This needle bearing is connected with this camshaft mechanism. The needle bearing is on this axle, so it would be on this axle, and everything is entering into this hole here. Through this axle is a hole. There is a drilled hole which stops somewhere here, and there are also small holes here. One is here, and the second one is here. So the oil will fill this part here, it will enter inside of this axle and exit through these small holes here. It will lubricate this bearing and also the camshaft drive. So the oil will exit through this hole here and lubricate this brass bushing. everything need to be checked and clean. If any of these holes are filled with mud, you will have low lubrication and eventually this part will worn out. So it is very important to have all of these parts cleaned and checked, because these parts are very expensive. To lubricate engine head, the oil will enter into this hole. It will go through this channel, lubricate this part here, and exit through this hole. After that, the oil will enter into this hole here. It is a straight hole, so there is nothing interesting about it. The oil will exit cylinder to this hole here. And it will enter into this hole here. So this is the engine head. And exit here. After that, the oil will enter here. Oil will enter here, immediately exit here. There is a small gasket here, and it will enter here. So this part here is very similar to this part here. You have similar bearing like this, but it doesn't have this back. It is completely free, almost identical. Bearing is this part here. It also has chamber where the oil will enter, so there is a small space between this bearing and this camshaft bridge, and that space will be filled with oil. The oil will exit through this hole here, here, and here. And enter into this hole here. There is also a channel here. It will enter inside of the camshaft. And also it will spill out onto this bearing and lubricate this needle bearings. The camshaft is part of the bearing, and also this here. So the oil will lubricate this bearing, these needles, and enter inside of the camshaft, and it will fill this space inside, and through this hole here and here the oil will exit and lubricate this part here. The interesting thing about this engine is also how this part is lubricated. So this is the upper part of the camshaft mechanism. So the oil enters into this part here through this camshaft. There is a bolt that goes all the way. Now this bolt here is a unique one. There is a difference in thickness here, here and here, and also there are channel here, here and here. So the oil will fill this compartment inside of the camshaft and will exit through this channel here and enter into these parts here. So the oil will fill this channel and this channel, and it will exit through this part here and this hole here, and that will lubricate this upper part of the camshaft drive. That is the reason for these channels, and they are precisely drilled. So once when this part enter, this channel will end somewhere here, and this channel will end somewhere here. And that will lubricate this part here. The rest of the head will be lubricated by oil spilling. So once when the camshaft starts to spin, the oil will throw oil all around the engine head, and it will lubricate these parts here. It will lubricate valve, springs and all of these small parts. The oil is returning back to the engine through this hole here. So it is going down into the engine. And this is how the engine lubrication on this engine is working. I hope I was able to explain it so that you understand what I was saying. it is very hard to explain exactly how this engine lubrication is working. It is much easier to explain someone in live than through this video, but I believe that everything what is important was shown, and just by looking you can make some conclusion to how this engine head and engine itself is lubricated. Before I finish this video, there is also one interesting thing about this engine, and that is the oil vapors. So some people asked me about this hole here. So this is the exit for the oil vapors from the inside of the engine. So there is a small pipe that goes here into this chamber, and this chamber is drilled here. So there is a hole that goes into that chamber. So this is the second part of that chamber. This part here has hole here, and that hole is connected with this hole. So, and also there is a channel that leads to this area here. So inside of this area is hole and channel that leaves here. Right here there should be a gasket. Now on this part the gasket is missing, but here is gasket. Shaft seal. So this is where the shaft seal need to be installed. So this part, when you install it, it will be like this. And the gasket, the shaft seal will seal this part here. So this part will be sealed. So this axle is drilled, and the oil vapors will enter through this axle into this chamber here, and it will exit through this channel, enter through this hole into this chamber here, and it will exit through this brass pipe out of the engine. If there is too much oil inside of the engine, that oil will also exit through this hole here. So sometimes people get panicked because there is a oil leaking, but that is not a problem. That is natural because there is too much oil, and that oil will exit with the oil vapors. So if there is a oil leaking, that does not mean that this shaft seal is defective. It can also mean that there is too much oil inside of the engine. If there is always oil leaking from the engine, then there is a big probability that this gasket is defective and the oil is entering into this chamber directly from the engine housing. So I believe that I have covered all of the oil system on this engine. I hope you understand me. So see you in next video. Finally the crankshaft has arrived after 3 months, maybe even longer, so I will begin with this engine assembly. I need to clean a few more parts and then I will begin with the assembling.